Okay, so today we are diving deep into Marburg virus.
Marburg virus.
Imagine you're in like a remote village somewhere, and this mysterious illness starts spreading, and all of a sudden people start getting fevers,
Yeah.
and then these crushing headaches,
Mhm.
and then you start to feel muscle aches that feel like your bones are breaking.
Yeah.
That is Marburg virus. And that's what we're talking about today. We've got stacks of research articles here that we're going to be going through to kind of break down what makes this virus tick, what it does to the body, and what's being done to combat it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and thankfully Marburg outbreaks are relatively uncommon, but they do really highlight just how closely linked human and animal health truly are, and they serve as a stark reminder, I guess, that emerging diseases are a global concern.
Absolutely.
We need to be ready for them.
Yeah. So when we talk about this virus, we know it's dangerous, but what is it like? What is it actually doing to the body?
So think of it this way. Almost like a microscopic wrecking ball,
Oh, wow.
targeting various organs, simultaneously. So this virus doesn't just attack one system. It disrupts the body on multiple fronts. So the hemorrhaging that we see, and the organ damage, those are direct results of this really widespread attack.
Oh, okay. So, and then one of the things that is really kind of scary about this, too, is that according to the research here, the fatality rate can be anywhere from 24 to 88%.
Exactly, yeah. And that's why, understanding this virus is so crucial. The more we know about how it behaves, the better equipped we are to develop treatments, to figure out preventive measures, all that stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about then, where does this come from? Is this like a new thing, or have we always had to deal with this?
So while the first recognized outbreaks were actually in Europe back in 1967, the research is showing us that fruit bats in Africa are the natural reservoir for the virus. Wait, so you're saying bats are just flying around with this deadly virus? Are they getting sick too?
So that's where it gets interesting. Bats, they have a very unique immune system that allows them to carry these viruses without showing symptoms. So they've adapted to coexist with these pathogens, but that same adaptation is what makes them, potential transmitters to other animals, including us.
So, okay. So then how does that transmission actually happen? I mean, if I'm walking down the street, do I need to worry about a bat like swooping down and infecting me? Or like, how does this work?
It's not quite that dramatic.
Okay.
The initial jump from bats to humans often happens through exposure in, like caves or mines where these bats are residing.
Okay. Yeah.
So, think about the kind of close contact that might be happening in those environments.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but then the research also says that it, can be transmitted human to human. So how does that all play into this?
Right. So once that virus enters the human population, then it can spread through direct contact with bodily fluids of an infected person. So this is particularly concerning, in places like healthcare settings.
Okay. Yeah.
As well as during certain funeral practices that involve direct contact with the deceased.
Right.
So these situations can they increase that risk of exposure, and they really highlight the need for proper infection control measures.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then that raises the question, what about treatment? Like, is there anything that could be done once someone is infected?
Unfortunately, currently there's no approved treatment or vaccine for Marburg virus disease.
So we're just kind of like hoping for the best. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not entirely. I mean, it's a challenging situation for sure, but there are, a few glimmers of hope. Supportive care, things like fluid replacement, managing the symptoms. Those things can increase a patient's chances of survival.
Okay.
And crucially, research is ongoing.
Okay, good.
And there's some promising developments.
Okay, so now you're talking.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this research.
So scientists are taking a multi-pronged approach. One really exciting area is drug discovery.
Okay.
They're using computers to screen thousands of plant compounds.
Wow.
Looking for anything that might inhibit the virus's ability to replicate.
So it's like we're looking for a cure in plants. That's pretty cool.
It's almost like a high-tech treasure hunt,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, a high-tech treasure hunt for a cure.
And they're actually finding some intriguing leads. Compounds like kudzuisoflavone A have shown some ability to interfere with the virus's essential proteins and hinder its ability to function.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else? What are some other research avenues that are being explored?
So another really clever approach focuses on preventing the virus from even entering human cells in the first place.
Oh,
So, think of it like in order for a virus to infect us, it has to kind of latch onto our cells, almost like a key fitting into a lock.
oh, okay. So we're talking about like changing the lock, so to speak.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
And so scientists are developing what are called entry inhibitors.
Entry inhibitors.
And these compounds, they target the specific proteins the virus uses to bind to our cells. So potentially, blocking the infection before it can even begin.
Okay, this sounds really, really good. What do you think? I mean, what are the chances of these treatments being available soon?
Well, while these research developments are really exciting, it's important to remember that they are still in their very early stages. We're talking about complex biological processes. And, rigorous testing is needed before we can say for sure whether these treatments are, safe and effective for humans.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So it's a lot of potential there, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what other strategies are we using to tackle this virus?
Well, researchers are also using what's called epidemiological modeling.
Epidemiological modeling.
And this helps predict how the virus might spread.
Okay.
So it involves building, complex mathematical models that consider various factors, things like, population density, travel patterns,
Okay.
and it helps anticipate potential outbreaks.
So it's almost like a weather forecast.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Epidemiological modeling helps public health officials prepare for those potential outbreaks and implement, control measures much more effectively.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, this is all really fascinating stuff, but I'm sure people listening are like, okay, well, what can I do? What can I actually do to protect myself?
Right.
So, like, any practical advice that you would give?
Well, I think, staying informed is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
Pay attention to any outbreaks or travel advisories that are issued by health organizations. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to infectious diseases.
So being aware is the first step.
Okay.
What else?
Well, if you're traveling to regions where Marburg is present, take extra precautions. Avoid contact with bats. Practice good hygiene, especially things like frequent hand washing.
Right.
Those simple measures can really, significantly reduce your risk.
Okay, so stay informed, be cautious when traveling, wash your hands.
Yes.
Got it. Anything else that we can do to kind of like, contribute to this whole fight against this virus?
Absolutely. I think, supporting public health efforts is crucial. These outbreaks require a really coordinated response.
Yeah.
So, consider supporting organizations that are working on the ground, advocate for research funding, even just spreading awareness within your own community can make a difference.
Right. That's a good point. It's not, we're not just bystanders in this whole thing.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive into the world of Marburg virus.
It is fascinating.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about what it does to the body. We talked about some promising research and how we can take action. But there's still a lot more to uncover. So join us for part 2 of our deep dive, where we're going to be delving further into the complexities of preventing and controlling outbreaks. And we'll explore kind of what the future holds for our battle against this deadly disease.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Welcome back to our deep dive on the Marburg virus. Last time we talked about a lot of like really heavy stuff. This is a pretty serious disease, but there's a lot of research and effort going into it. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is. It's a testament to human ingenuity and really just collaboration.
Yeah.
How quickly, scientists and healthcare professionals mobilize to try to tackle these emerging threats. It's really impressive.
Absolutely. One thing that really kind of stood out to me from all of this research is the role of bats.
Yeah.
In transmitting this virus. And it made me wonder, are there other diseases out there that are similar, where bats are kind of playing this role?
Oh, absolutely. You're spot on to make that connection. Bats are actually known to host a surprisingly wide array of viruses. Some quite notorious, right? Like rabies, even Ebola. They're kind of like, these flying libraries of viral diversity.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's both really fascinating and kind of freaky at the same time.
Right.
So, like, what is it about bats that makes them such good carriers of these viruses?
Well, it really comes down to their unique immune system. They've evolved this remarkable ability to carry these viruses without getting sick themselves.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've struck this truce with these pathogens, right?
Right.
Where they can kind of just coexist.
But then that same ability that protects them
Yeah.
is what makes them such a potential vector for spreading it to other animals.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's this delicate balance, and it really emphasizes, the importance of what's known as the One Health approach.
The One Health approach.
It's this concept that recognizes that human health, animal health, and the environment, they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
We can't really look at these things in isolation.
Yeah.
When we're trying to understand and address diseases like Marburg.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like all these things are tied together. Okay. That makes sense. So shifting back to Marburg specifically, though, the outbreaks so far have seemed relatively contained. Is this something that the average person really needs to be worried about?
Well, it's a valid question. And while it's not currently at, pandemic levels like we saw with COVID-19,
Right.
the potential is certainly there. Those 20 documented outbreaks that we talked about before.
Yeah.
That number could easily climb, if we're not vigilant.
So it's almost like this simmering pot that could boil over, if the right conditions are there.
That's an apt analogy, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and the lack of readily available treatments and vaccines, really makes it all the more crucial to stay ahead of the curve. We're essentially playing catch up with each outbreak, right?
Yeah.
And without those tools, we're always going to be at a disadvantage.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these research efforts that are so promising. We touched on the drug discovery process, but I'd love to just kind of dig a little deeper into that. Like, how do scientists even begin to find compounds that might actually work against a virus like this?
Well, technology is playing an increasingly important role in all this.
Okay.
Scientists are harnessing, the power of computers to really streamline this process. So they build these virtual models of the virus.
Okay.
And then they can screen, thousands, even millions of potential compounds against those models.
Oh,
It's like, a virtual battle, like testing which compounds can disrupt the virus's function.
So like millions of tiny little soldiers fighting a virus inside a computer.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Okay.
Yeah. And this approach has a few major advantages. I mean, first of all, it speeds up the discovery process significantly. So it can help researchers quickly narrow down that field of potential candidates for further testing.
Wow. That's really amazing.
Right.
But are there any drawbacks to relying so heavily on computer models?
Well, of course, there's always the caveat that a compound that shows promise in a computer model
Right.
doesn't necessarily guarantee success in real world applications. There's still a long road from that initial screening to developing a safe and effective treatment for humans.
Yeah, it's like finding a key, right? But you've got to make sure it actually fits the lock and opens the door.
Exactly.
Okay, so, and speaking of keys and locks, you mentioned the entry inhibitors, in the first part.
Right.
That's another really, really fascinating area of research to me.
Yeah.
They seem so, they seem like a really clever way to target this virus.
Yeah.
So can you just kind of break down how they actually work?
Sure. So think of it this way. The virus, it needs to attach itself to a human cell in order to infect it, right?
Yeah.
And it has these specific proteins on its surface that act like almost like grappling hooks,
Okay.
and they latch onto these receptors on the cell surface. And so entry inhibitors work by essentially gumming up those grappling hooks.
Oh, okay.
So they prevent the virus from, attaching and injecting its genetic material.
So like putting a boot on the virus's tire, just stop it dead in its tracks.
I love that analogy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it really captures the idea. And What's particularly encouraging is that some of these N-heterocyclic Borneol derivatives, which are the compounds that are being studied as potential entry inhibitors, they seem to be effective against multiple strains of Marburg virus.
Wow. Okay, so that's a huge advantage, right? Because viruses, they mutate, they evolve. It's like you're trying to hit a moving target. So to have something that is broad spectrum like that, that's a big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like having a weapon that can adapt to the virus's changes, which is crucial in the long run. But even if these treatments become available, prevention is still really paramount, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are the most effective strategies then for preventing these outbreaks from happening in the first place?
Well, I think, circling back to that One Health approach, I think understanding the role of bats is really crucial. Educating people who live near bat habitats about the risks of exposure
Okay.
and how to safely coexist with bats.
Right.
That can go a long way in preventing those initial spillover events.
So it's not about like eradicating bats or anything. It's about respecting their place in the ecosystem.
Exactly. It's finding that balance.
Yeah.
It might involve, encouraging alternative livelihoods for people who currently depend on bat hunting or guano mining, for example.
Right.
Activities that bring them into, into close contact with the virus. Strengthening surveillance systems is also key. Allowing us to detect outbreaks early and respond swiftly. And of course, continued investment in research for vaccines and treatments remains a top priority.
Okay, so it's really like this multifaceted challenge, right? It's not just about the science. It's about, economics and education and cultural sensitivity. It's a lot to think about.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's this complex web of interconnected factors.
Yeah.
And it highlights why global collaboration is just so essential.
Yeah.
No one country can tackle this alone. We need to share information. We need to share resources, expertise. If we're going to effectively, combat Marburg and really other emerging diseases, right? This is not just a Marburg-specific problem.
Right. This is bigger than that. Okay, well, this has been really, really insightful. Before we move on, I just want to kind of bring it back to our listeners, right?
Yeah.
What's like the one key takeaway you want them to remember from all of this?
Well, I think the most important message is that, we're not powerless, in the face of these threats. While Marburg virus is a serious disease, there are steps we can take to protect ourselves and our communities.
Yeah.
Stay informed, be aware of the risks, support those efforts to prevent and control outbreaks. And just remember that, the choices we make, both individually and collectively can have a real impact on global health.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point. All right. Well, this has been a really informative discussion. It's clear that there's a lot happening on the research front, on the prevention front. But what does this all mean for the future?
Right.
So join us for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore kind of the long-term implications of the Marburg virus and what the future might hold for this battle against this pretty formidable foe.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last two parts really getting into the nitty-gritty of the Marburg virus. It's been fascinating and a little bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
But as we kind of wrap things up, I want to shift our focus to the future.
Right.
What lies ahead in our fight against this virus? I mean, are we looking at a future where these outbreaks are just going to become more and more common, more and more severe? Or is there hope for a brighter future?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question, right? That's what keeps a lot of researchers and public health officials up at night. And to be honest, the answer is it's complex. There are reasons to be both cautious and optimistic. On the one hand, as we've been discussing, these emerging infectious diseases like Marburg, they really remind us that we live in a world where, new threats are constantly appearing.
Yeah. It feels like we're always playing this game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Right? Like just when we think we've got a handle on one thing, something else pops up.
Exactly.
It can be discouraging.
I understand that. I understand that sentiment. But I think that's where the optimism comes in.
Okay.
We're also living in a time of incredible scientific progress. The tools and techniques that we have for studying viruses, for, developing treatments, for understanding how diseases spread. We're light years ahead of where we were just a few decades ago.
So it's like we're leveling up our defenses
Yeah.
at the same time that these new threats are emerging.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And that's why I think, in a lot of ways, we're in a much better position to actually face these challenges than ever before. We have a deeper understanding of virology.
Yeah.
We have more sophisticated research tools.
Right.
And we have a greater awareness of the importance of global collaboration.
Yeah, that global cooperation piece seems absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
We can't just close our borders and pretend these threats don't exist.
Right.
They don't respect those boundaries.
You're absolutely right, and that's where organizations like the World Health Organization, for example, play such a vital role. They facilitate communication and data sharing between countries. They coordinate surveillance efforts. They provide crucial support to regions that are facing outbreaks. They're really instrumental in all of this.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got the scientific advancements, we've got the global cooperation. What about the everyday person? What role do we play as individuals in shaping this future?
Well, I think that's where things get really interesting, because individual actions can actually have, kind of a ripple effect.
Right.
Things like staying informed about these emerging diseases. Practicing good hygiene, supporting public health initiatives, advocating for policies that prioritize global health security.
Yeah.
These actions might seem small on an individual level, but collectively they create a more resilient world.
Like we're all part of this big global immune system.
Yeah.
And the more we do individually to kind of strengthen our own defenses, the stronger that whole system becomes.
I love that analogy. And it's important to remember that it's not just about, protecting ourselves from Marburg. It's about building a world that's better equipped to handle whatever health challenges come our way, whether it's a known virus like Marburg or something entirely new.
Yeah. Well said. So as we conclude this deep dive into the world of the Marburg virus, what's that one thought that you want to leave our listeners with? What's that key takeaway, from all this?
I think the most important message is that the future isn't, it's not predetermined. It's shaped by the choices that we make today.
Okay.
And by understanding, the threats we face, embracing scientific progress and working together, we can create a future where diseases like Marburg no longer hold the power to terrorize us. The path forward, it's clear, but it requires collective action.
Yeah.
And a commitment to building a healthier and more resilient world.
That's a really powerful message to end on. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Marburg virus. We hope that you've learned a lot about this complex and challenging disease, and more importantly, that you've come away with a sense of hope for the future. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged in the fight for a healthier world.